You're listening to Tech and Gaming for a Better World on GMODISM. Alright, very welcome to Gaming and Tech for a Better World with GMODISM channel. I'm Eric.
I'm Carrie, and we are back
again.
after like a month, which is insane to think about. Feels like well, I was going to say it feels like it's only been like 3 weeks, but 3 weeks is basically a month. So I guess
it's basically 3 weeks.
I guess that. Yeah, whatever.
And today we're going to talk about immersion.
We are.
Specifically gaming immersion.
Yes.
I would have imagined.
Yeah, no, that's where I was coming from too. I sort of have two angles on this actually.
Yeah.
To begin with, I was thinking of immersion in terms of like that sort of flow state that you enter a little bit sometimes.
Because I was about to ask you, what is immersion for you?
There you go. Immersion to me means, well, the thing is, I see it in two ways, right? You've got immersion in terms of let's say, like the immersion into the game world. That's one thing. And then I also think of immersion in terms of that little flow state you can get into sometimes. You know, when you've been gaming for a while, like you have like an 8-hour session just playing one thing and time passes like that. I do think that's a form of immersion as well.
Yeah, but like game world immersion.
Yeah, but narrative immersion and sort of gameplay immersion are two different things.
And we have sensory immersion as well.
Oh, talk to me about that.
Sensory immersion is when you feel engaged and you feel a lot with your senses in the game world. So, for example, something we're going to talk a little bit about later, screen size. How the size of your screen affects the immersion because it's a sensory element.
Right.
Then we have sound quality. If you play a game with very bad sound, of course, it's going to hurt the immersion. If the sound design is bad, it's the two. And then we have, of course, all sorts of new things. VR.
True.
And AR.
True. Which I have not tried either of those. I'm interested too though, but it feels like the sort of the bar to entry, like price wise, is still quite high.
Yeah.
VR and stuff. I don't know though.
I tried the I think it's Oculus Rift or whatever.
The Rift, I guess that's the big one.
Yeah,
right?
The one bought by Facebook Meta.
Yeah, that's
them, right?
So.
Yeah, but I tried one of their later models.
The Oculus, the Vive was also, that's HTC, right? That's a different thing though. I guess those two were I think they were the two big ones, and then Steam, of course, has their the Steam I think it's called Steam VR, right?
Do anybody care about that? I never heard anyone.
I feel like it was sort of for me, I'm thinking like if I was gonna buy into the whole VR thing, I'd probably go for the Steam option.
Yeah.
Just because that feels like, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm so I have no idea about the like VR actually. It's just that I tried some of them. I think it's 2 different headsets. And that's of course sensory immersion. So we have like gameplay immersion where we are inside a game world. We have a sensory immersion, how like your senses are communicating and immerse yourself in the game.
How to trick yourself into thinking you're part of the experience, essentially. Right?
And then we have like world building immersion, like you talk about, like, do you actually feel you're part of this world or not? Skyrim and Fallout 3 is good at.
Yeah, I would say, I mean the thing about narrative immersion or game world immersion, what you were talking, the last point we were talking about, I think the main sort of the key to success there, I think, is making sure that the game world feels as though it could exist without the player.
Yeah.
Which, there's levels to it, obviously, like 10, 15, well, not 15 years, well, nearly 15 years ago, like Skyrim was very like, their whole Radiant AI thing that they had going on, where it's like, oh, the NPCs have their own schedules and blah, 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 blah. It is very sort of transparently mechanical these days, but at the time it was impressive, right?
Yeah, everyone did their thing.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool,
Yeah, no, I think so. I think the earliest example of like, if we're talking about like NPC schedules and sort of that illusion of like the game world's continuing on even if you're not present. I talked about this in a previous episode, I think, but in passing. But Shenmue was my big big sort of introduction to that, because that was the first time where I really felt like, oh my god, like this feels like, and it was sort of frustrating to me as a kid because I was fairly young at the time, so I didn't necessarily, that sort of fascination you have with like, let's say there's a door that's closed, and in reality, there's nothing behind that door because it's a video game.
Yeah.
But you keep feeling like, oh, what's behind that door? I wish I could find, that like.
I wish I could open that door.
Where the limits of the game world sort of disappear a little bit for you. That's how I felt with Shenmue. I was like, I feel like I could get on an airplane and go anywhere, in this, because it was so sort of, at the time, it was so impressive to me, and it really sort of left I need to replay those games. I haven't in a long time. I played the second one when I was a kid, and I got the. They re-released the first two games a couple of years ago. I have those, but I haven't played them yet. But they're also like really slow burners in terms of like. I think I played the first one. When the remasters came out, I played like 2 or 3 hours, and I'm barely out of like the first room. You know what I mean? Because it's like granular in the sense that like, oh, there's a set of drawers here. You can open every single drawer. There's not going to be anything in most of them, but you can sort of
sometimes.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like that sort of level of like pointless detail.
Yeah, like
I think Shenmue 2 at the time was also like one of the most expensive games ever made at that point.
I can't comment on it much because I haven't played it, but I do know from like Skyrim and like Fallout 3, which I played a lot, which is of course you can open everything and just search around. But I heard gameplay wise that people say that Fallout 1 and 2 is more gameplay like world-wise immersive.
Maybe, yeah.
But
I haven't played the first two. I'd like to. But
me neither. I'm also thinking I'd like to play them sometimes. But you definitely feel that a world like Skyrim could exist without the player.
Do you though? Because I feel like that's I don't know what it is about. Maybe it's just because I've been playing Skyrim as much as I have, and I sort of know, like with modding and everything, I sort of know how the game works. And maybe that's ruined the magic for me a little bit, because I'm like,
I think the magic for me with Skyrim is that I have avoided the main quest.
Yeah.
I've been side questing.
Yeah.
And it's just a little world with small things happening from time to time, and nothing important, just walking around exploring, and in that sense it's immersive. And I think when you play the main quest, I think, which I haven't even completed yet, I think that breaks the immersion a little bit. Because when you're living a pretty simple life and walking around in Skyrim, it's realistic-ish.
Yeah, I mean, and it's sort of it's consistent. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it makes the game world as presented to you does make sense.
Yeah.
Right? But I guess that was my experience with Oblivion. I haven't really had that experience with Skyrim as much, but then I played the main quest of Skyrim pretty early on, whereas with Oblivion, I really sort of lingered in that game world for a long time. I did eventually finish the main quest, but even then it was like I sort of got stuck, like not stuck, but like I got to a point where I was like, I'm already like halfway through this, the main quest, so I might as well just finish it. And then I remember once I'd finished the main quest and it sort of the world opened back up to me and I could just do whatever I wanted, I was like, oh yes, thank God. You know what I mean? Because that's the majority of those kinds of games. The majority of the game content is not the main quest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. So. It's very interesting. I want to play more of Morrowind. I haven't finished Oblivion.
I haven't played Morrowind much. I've played maybe half an hour or so.
Me neither. I just played a couple of hours, and I want to play like Morrowind and Oblivion more because I've heard that both of them are more immersive.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
But I guess it's one of those things where the world building in those games is so strong, but then mechanically, especially Morrowind, which is sort of dated in this day and age, right?
And they're trying to make a Morrowind inside Skyrim-ish.
Oh yeah, they're doing that with Oblivion too.
Yeah,
Skyblivion, right?
Skyblivion, and what's the Morrowind one called? I don't remember.
More Oblivion? No, but that's Morrowind inside Oblivion. That's more Oblivion, I think.
Skywind?
Skywind. That's
I
it.
think maybe.
That's it.
But it's very interesting, and immersion is such a complex and broad topic, because when we're talking about immersion, it's like, what is immersion? It's like, story-wise, we can understand immersion, but you could say that a game like Minecraft, it is extremely unimmersive. But mechanically, it doesn't have a story, but mechanically, it's mechanically immersive, because you need to cut down a tree to get wood, and you can't just, if you want to have planks, you'll have to make them.
Yeah.
And so, like, mechanically, a game can be immersive. I feel that talking about immersion as a topic in general, it's, I don't know, it's a kind of a bad word.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
What you propose instead?
I think immersion encompasses too many different areas. And I don't know what would be necessarily a better world, but I just feel that it's complex, because when we're talking about Bethesda games, we have games that are story-wise sometimes, world-wise sometimes immersive.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, but also, again, this is like an old meme.
Yeah.
But like Bethesda's story, like world building, is usually like you find a skeleton, and then there's a note next to the skeleton, and the note says, "Oh no, I'm dead." You know what I mean? So I don't know. Sometimes it's a little bit.
I think Bethesda does the world immersion really good.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the super immersive like stories.
No, that's true.
Because
That's how I feel about. Again, that's sort of the conceit of those stories as well.
Yeah.
Like that's the point of most Bethesda game stories is like, because the player is always like the chosen one in some respect. At least with Elder Scrolls, that's always like you got the Neverween, you got the prisoner in Oblivion, you got the Dragonborn, blah 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 blah. My problem with that though is it does eventually feel like all of the other characters in the game world are just sort of standing around waiting for you to come in. Do you know what I mean? And that bothers me. That bothers me extremely.
When we play the main quest. So I think the Bethesda games like the Fallout series and the Elder Scrolls.
And another interesting thing, speaking of Fallout, because I know at least the first game, I don't know about Fallout 2, but the first game was on a time limit too, wasn't it? I think there was like I don't remember the exact what the situation was, so to speak, but the game literally had you on a pretty generous time limit, but a time limit nonetheless.
Yeah.
And that's also something where I feel like, again, not to talk about fucking Tomb Raider again, I'm so sorry. This is the one point of reference that I have, okay? So let me have this. The latest one, Shadow.
Yeah.
You're like in a sort of apocalyptic scenario. That's way too many syllables. Apocalyptic scenario. There's like an apocalypse going on, essentially.
Yes.
The problem is the game wants you to be immersed in the game world to such an extent that it sort of forgets that the apocalypse is happening. So there's like this overhanging threat of like all these cataclysms and like time is running out essentially in terms of the story. But then it's like, oh, here's a side quest. Go find these dice for this kid who lost them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so, and that's pretty cool because in Skyrim you can side quest forever. There is like.
But there's no time limit there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. There is no time limit. That's exactly which kind of breaks the story-wise immersion. It's like I don't even know what their main, the Stormcloaks versus the Empire or whatever.
Yeah, the
you know,
medieval neo-Nazis versus the
basically Roman Empire versus the
essentially.
Yeah, well, and it's like they're having a war or whatever.
But it's very.
I'm doing my thing.
Yeah.
I take my time. I don't care. So I think the Bethesda games are like world-wise immersive, but story-wise not.
But that's the thing. I wish maybe that more games would, and I know why they're hesitant to put time limits on on these kinds of things, because it's like, oh, what? But then you won't get to experience all that the game has to offer.
It's hard to make an open world and have a time limit.
And that's also why with so many games these days, a lot of them don't really have any side content.
Yeah.
Because the reasoning is that if there is side content, that's effort, like time and money and resources we put into those things that can be entirely missed by the player.
Yeah.
And so they're afraid from a business standpoint to sort of invest too much in permanently missable content, essentially. But I do wish that was more, that they wouldn't be as afraid to sort of go there with it. Because I feel like, again, with the Skyrim main quest, for example, where it's like, if we're in the middle of a war,
Yeah.
I would love for that to reflect in the rest of the game world. And I would love to be on a sort of, I want there to be an element of pressure in that. Do you know what I mean?
Why can I live my slow hunting, scavenging, wilderness walking life
Exactly.
forever?
Yes.
And the war is coming. It seems like some kind of bullshit. And
Yeah.
it doesn't even feel like real. It's like, yeah. They've been
It's
talking
interesting.
about this for many years.
It becomes set dressing, and that's where it stops being immersive. Because
Yeah.
you can sort of see, like, imagine you're on a theater stage, and there's like a backdrop, and you can see, I don't know if you've been to the theater much, but when you can sort of see the supports on the backs of the backdrops, that's how I feel with that. It's like, okay, this is clearly just artifice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
And then I think, like, world-wise, a game like Crysis. I played Crysis 1, 2, and 3.
I haven't played those, actually.
I mean, the first Crysis is the best. Crysis 2 is the worst. Crysis
Really?
3 is okay.
Really? Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and
Usually it's the other way around. You have a really good first game, and often the sequel's even better, but then the third one is like where they sort of drop the ball a little bit. So that's interesting.
and it's like the first one is, and even, I would even say that they put the expansion on Crysis 1, which is Crysis Warhead,
Yeah.
it's called. I'd say that's the best one.
Okay, cool.
The first Crysis is cool too, but Crysis 2, oh no. Crysis 3, it's okay. They made
Like
it all right.
Neverwinter Nights, though. Neverwinter Nights, the base game, was just sort of meant to be a showcase of the level editor and the tool sets, and then the expansions were sort of proper, like.
Oh wow, weird.
Yeah, this is a very old example, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, the expansions are so much better because you can tell that they've made them not to sort of just be tech demos.
I didn't play it much, actually, just a little bit.
No, I played a lot when I was a kid, and of course at the time that didn't really occur to me. But sort of looking back on it now, I'm like, this feels like a tech demo. And then you get to the expansions, and it's like, okay, well, this is actually fun. Like, there's a story here, and I mean, technically, the expansions are even centered on a different protagonist.
Yeah.
So like those two are connected, but then the main campaign is just like a separate thing.
Anyways, what I was talking about, like Crysis, is that the world doesn't feel real. Like, it's hard to believe that anything of this is real. But the story is pretty immersive.
Okay.
If you're not walking around in the world and doing your thing, and you're just engaging in doing the quests, then it kind of feels immersive. Because if you're looking too much, it's like, why are I think it's like the North Korean military. Okay. Why are they like chilling here all the time? Why there is no transports? Why are they alone out here? What are they even doing here? Yeah. And it's like,
but is it that open? I thought Crysis was more of like a point A to point B thing.
It is pretty point A to point B, but you can, of course, walk another direction and do something, and there is nothing to do if you do that. It's just that you can walk.
But then
it's
again,
like open-ish.
Given the fidelity of Crysis at the time, anyway, yeah. I don't know how much it still holds up, but like at the time, I remember, like, even on a simulation level, it was very, very impressive.
Yeah, Crysis still looks good.
So in that sense, I would imagine it's quite immersive.
It's quite immersive, and the physics is, like, real, with explosions and stuff.
Yeah.
Bullets go through some material. And bullets can bounce, I think, too.
And you can, like, uproot trees and stuff, right? Or is that...
I think... you can... Actually, explosions and big machine guns will make trees fall down.
Yeah, there is another game that I cannot... Is it Mercenaries that I'm thinking of? There was another game that had like, or maybe it's Just Cause, maybe that I'm thinking of, but there was one game that had very sort of granular, really realistic like physics
Probably
in terms
Just
of like
Cause.
destruction. Probably Just Cause, actually, I think so.
And that's the same with Crisis. You can blow up almost any building in like detail. A lot of the buildings are actually destroyable, and that's really cool.
Yeah, but again, it's like if there's no point to destroying all of these buildings, why would you? Unless
Yeah.
you're doing it just to test it out. But at that point, I feel like if you're just doing something to try it in the game sense, then it's like
But it's
that's also you've lost the immersion at that point as well.
It's a super cool thing you can do in Crisis. You can take a C4.
Yeah.
You can stick it on a like fuel barrel. You
Yeah.
can pick up the barrel, enter like
Excuse me.
strength mode. So you have the strength mode, and then you can throw this
It's
barrel
like a Deus Ex thing.
Yeah.
You can tap into like
at a car, and then you make it explode with the C4. So you blow up, and you get it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That you can do that. It's it feels immersive in a game mechanic wise with the physics and
Which
stuff.
brings me to, because that made me think of Deus Ex just now.
Yeah.
Just because apparently, because you have in Crisis, there's like you have like an exoskeleton or something, right?
Yeah.
And then that lets you, and of course with Deus Ex, you have the modifications and everything, so you can sort of do very similar things. I guess that's the question though, because in Deus Ex, gameplay wise, you're so immersed. Again, immersive sims is what we call them, right? Like Deus Ex, Dishonored, Prey. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, I would also argue, is an immersive sim to some extent.
I need to play that.
You haven't played it yet, huh?
I haven't played it. I haven't even played Dishonored, but I own it. I need to play
Dishonored's
that too.
good.
Yeah,
really,
I know.
really good.
I heard
Really
so.
good. What was I saying?
The super suits and immersion.
Yeah. No, in terms of the choice that you're given as the player, because again, in Crisis, is there ever a situation in which it would come to you naturally and not just as like an experiment for the sake of it, to plant C4 on an explosive barrel and then throw it at somebody? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. If you're smart, it's like in Crisis. The cool thing with the even though the world itself, like gameplay wise, it is immersive. I can take up a rock and throw it somewhere, and the soldiers will hear that, and they will be suspicious, and then we'll check it out.
Sure.
So then I can draw away attention.
Sure.
And if I'm throwing a barrel with C4, and they don't see me throwing it, they don't know where it came from.
Right.
They just heard where it lands.
But would they check where it came from if they saw the arc of the bar? I don't know how.
Yeah,
advanced the AI
if
is.
they
'Cause that's like unusual even still, right?
if they see you like throwing it, I don't know if they can see the arc. It's too.
Do you know what I mean? Because that's one of those things. Because I like stealth games,
Yeah.
and whenever they have that sort of distraction mechanic where it's like, oh, you can throw stuff, and it's like a bottle or a rock or whatever it is. It's like clearly you saw the rock coming from behind this little box that I'm hiding behind. Why wouldn't you check behind the box? Why are you going over to investigate where the item landed? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's pretty. Yeah, exactly. If they can see the item thrown, they should be able to. And I don't
know if that's how that works, though.
It's just that I think in Crisis, after a while, things becomes like too stressful, and these aliens also,
There's
appear.
aliens
Yeah.
in Crisis. Oh god.
Yeah, there is mostly aliens in Crisis.
I mean, it's like in the first Uncharted game when the zombies sort of appear in the third act out of nowhere, and it's like, okay, it's a zombie game now. Cool.
It's not
Spoilers,
to,
by the way. Sorry.
not to spoil anything, but it's like it's hard to. Yeah, it's so big part of Crisis, First, it's the military, and everyone is there, and they want to check out some mysterious things. But then we get other company, and they're not as easy to trick.
Okay.
Like you can try.
Okay, cool.
So if you tried, you can have different tactics, and if you want to blow up a wall, I mean, you might say it's useless, but maybe you want to do that to take a shortcut. If you're thinking a lot, Crisis game world is immersive.
Yeah.
If you're not thinking a lot, well then I guess it depends. You can just do stupid shit to do it.
Yeah. No, because again, that's sort of I do appreciate like being able to do stupid stuff for the sake of it, but it's like it's the game inviting you to do these things. Because that's sort of how I feel about You really should play Bloodlines. It is
I
really
know, I even own it.
and narratively also, because it is very dialogue heavy, and you can play it very socially, which is what I prefer to do. Because the combat mechanics are a little bit scuffed. We all know this. If you've played it or if you've heard about it, it is a buggy game. It's not like perfect by any means, but in terms of the social gameplay, what I found so fascinating about that, and which I haven't really seen any other examples of this that I can think of anyway, is like in dialogue, sometimes you'll have, because you get like a little dialogue tree with options, right?
Yeah.
Then you can say yes, you can say no, you can say blah, blah. Sometimes, or a lot of the time, in Bloodline specifically, you'll have dialogue choices that are entirely... And it's a role-playing game, so this makes sense, but even role-playing games don't do this often enough. For me, like, sometimes you'll have options that lead to the same outcome. It's just that you... And really, mechanically, it doesn't really make a difference. But for your own sort of role-playing purposes, you have, like, 5 different ways of saying yes to something. I'm exaggerating slightly, but very often you'll have, like, 2 dialogue options that just lead down the same path in the dialogue tree, but there's you can sort of make your own little mark on it.
Yeah,
you can role play for your own.
I get it. It's like the dialogue options is very important for immersion into the game world.
Yeah.
It's like in Mass Effect when you get to sometimes you get like a lot of options, and that feels very immersive. And sometimes you get like 3 options, and you're like, I don't.
But also,
I don't want to choose any one of these 3. Why?
With Mass Effect, although I do love the writing in Mass Effect. It's a very well written game for the most part. But the thing there is, all those, you have 5 dialogue options. Those 5 options are all going to lead someplace different in the dialogue tree, let's say. Whereas if I'm accepting a mission in Bloodlines, sometimes I'll have the option to be like, oh yeah, I'll do it. Fine, sure. If I'm accepting a quest, let's say, or a mission or whatever, and then I could also say, this is a waste of my fucking time, but I guess I'll do it anyway. And like mechanically, it doesn't really make a difference because you're still accepting the quest, and the NPC disposition doesn't necessarily change all the time. There is a system for that also, but it's not really. It's not really like mechanically important, but I just find that to be so.
But it's pretty cool,
I think Disco Elysium also does a lot of this.
Yeah.
I haven't played Disco Elysium enough, but that's because I don't really have the. I am planning to. It's just that it's so dialogue heavy, it's so text heavy, and I sort of have to be in the mood to read a book if I'm going to play it.
When is Disco Elysium from? Is it old?
No, it was released in like 2018, 19. 2017 maybe. It's not that old.
I don't actually have a good understanding on what it is, but
it is basically an RPG, and it's very sort of abstract in some ways, and it's very, very text heavy, very dialogue heavy.
Yeah, and I think that
And it also has those sort of examples of like you can say one thing in 2 different ways.
Yeah.
Although with Disco Elysium that's even better actually, because in that game it does seem like, as far as from what I've played, if you choose the ruder option of saying yes to something, that is going to have an effect. That's going to it's hard to explain like mechanically how it works, but it's essentially like a choose your own adventure book, but just with a sort of a visual element to it. But there's a lot of text,
Because I might misremember, but I do think that it's not very often. But I do think Mass Effect also has sometimes the options where you can say the same in different ways.
That's true. That's true. That is.
But it's of course more is better, and I just thought about when we have these different dialogue options, it would be pretty cool if we could imagine not like completely AI powered dialogue, but if you have like different options the NPC can answer from, like say if it's yes, if it's a yes, if it's a no, and you could make like an AI-based system that analyzes what the player said and then answers yes or no in the context of what was like answered.
Yeah.
So we have kind of, it would be interesting if NPCs could have some kind of artificial generative knowledge which is very narrow and very like based on a very small dialogue, not like open dialogue because that would break the immersion, but that we could just take a little help on AI to. So if that would be very interesting, like immersive wise, that if you could speak to like the NPC and say, I don't want to do that. I want to pet my cat. And the NPC is like, you're a horrible person. This and this person have just died, and you're talking about your cat. Get out of here.
Yeah.
If the answer is gonna be, get out of here, or like, please.
I'm stuck on Disco Elysium still. You should play that too. Again, it's extremely text heavy. So
is it like 3D or is it like 2D or?
It's isometric, but it is 3D.
It's isometric.
It is essentially just a role playing game, but with a lot of text and a lot of dialogue, and even in terms of like let's put it this way, there is combat in the game. The combat is not like there's no combat system. It's all in dialogue. You know what I mean?
Weird.
And sometimes you'll have these like thoughts to yourself. Like the protagonist will have a thought.
Yeah.
And then you enter sort of a dialogue mini game with your. You have like an internal monologue essentially.
Yeah.
It's like internal monologue, the video game.
That's weird.
And in that sense, that's where it becomes really interesting, because you have, again, if you have these 5 different ways of saying yes to something or saying no, or essentially just like saying the same thing but with a slight sort of twist or a slightly different sort of attitude.
Yeah.
The game will respond to that. And again, because it is so text heavy, it was a labor of love, clearly. It is very reactive to the choices you've made up until that point. So what you're describing with the AI, if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're describing, this sort of hypothetical AI system, Disco Elysium comes very close to that, I think. Because it is very like, oh, but you said this 2 hours ago, and now you're saying this other thing, and that's not very like internally consistent. And then the whole sort of it is very, the game's just reactive to your choices in a very granular way.
Very believable, immersive.
To a point where it will call you out if you're being inconsistent.
That's nice.
And that's sort of the point of it too. Because sometimes it doesn't give you a choice other than to be inconsistent, let's say.
That's like very thought-wise immersive.
Yeah.
Because something that I always feel like breaks the immersion in like Skyrim is that like
being rude to somebody and then they
and then like, I stole your shit last week and now you're okay with me.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting. It feels like immersive-wise for different games, it's very hard to find a game that's immersive in all levels. Some like Minecraft is very like a game world, not game world, like game mechanic-wise immersive.
Aaron,
Valheim.
Immersion, generally speaking, if we're gonna sort of summarize it, immersion is about creating a parallel to the real world, or sort of.
Maybe not parallel to real world. I think immersion is more, does this mechanic, does this game make you feel inside of the game? Does it make you believe the game?
But what you're saying about like games are usually, or at least not any examples that I can think of, but they're not usually immersive in all of the ways that are that are theoretically possible for like
is it possible to make a game that's sensory immersive, game world immersive, and game mechanic immersive?
No, and do you know why?
No,
because that would be the real world. That would be real life. That would be right now we're sitting here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess that could be, but I mean. It's like different game needs to focus on different things, because otherwise the game will be too broad.
Yeah,
so if you try to make everything too immersive, it will be too it will just be too much, and make all the things play together will also be difficult.
It's just impossible. Well, not impossible, but it would be
a world simulator.
It would be a nearly insurmountable amount of work for real people, real developers to do this. And again, with AI, AI is not advanced enough yet to a point where it would be able to do all of these things in a altogether like convincing way.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, there would be moments of brilliance, I'm sure, but like in general, an AI, it's not going to be able to create that sort of game either, because there's always going to be holes. You know what I mean?
Of course, but it feels like this type of all-encompassing immersion, wasn't that kind of what Starfield wanted to do?
I don't know.
Because that's how it tried to solve it in, I think.
I don't know if they were. Maybe they were. I didn't really follow the marketing campaign. All I know about Starfield is it was way overhyped.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when it released, it's like, oh, cool, we have a game with graphics from the current year and gameplay mechanics that are like essentially unchanged from, let's say,
wasn't that one of the problems? The graphics felt dated already on release.
I don't think it was the graphics. I think it was just like the way, like in terms of if you just took a screenshot of it, it looks good, right?
I think it was the graphics too, actually.
Maybe a little bit, but
dated.
my understanding of the problem with Starfield is that it was just too mechanically dated. Like
Yeah.
it felt like you were playing Skyrim, and with Skyrim, if you were to play Skyrim today, you know you're playing Skyrim. You know what
Yeah.
to expect. But if you're playing
It
a
is
game,
dated.
it is, and if you're playing a game that was released like this year, for example, and it played like a game from 10, 15 years ago, and you didn't know that's the experience you were getting into, of course that's going to reflect badly
Yeah,
on
you'll
your
notice that.
experience. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but it's interesting, like...
I'm also not really, like, with Starfield, I like Mass Effect.
Yeah.
That's sort of, that genre of sci-fi is what I really enjoy.
Mhm.
Starfield seems a little bit too... Like, I had a... Well, not me, but, like, I had a bit of a faith a couple of years ago. Well, not a, I was going to the movies with my dad a lot, and he likes all these, like, anytime there's a new sci-fi movie, he wants to see it because he likes
Yeah.
sci-fi.
Yeah.
And to me, Starfield feels very much like those sort of semi-generic, like, Hollywood blockbuster sci-fi movies that aren't really trying to say or do anything. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, here's a cool, there's spaceships. Cool.
Random spaceship, random Mars colony.
Yeah, and it's like this is not doing anything interesting. Especially with sci-fi and speculative fiction, it's like if you're just sticking to. Yeah, it's just unimaginative.
Yeah.
That's how I felt about it, and to be honest, I feel the same way about Oblivion and Skyrim as well.
Mhm.
Like in terms of the world building, it is, if you compare it to Morrowind,
Yeah.
because they had a shift in sort of the canon. Because when they released Oblivion, I feel like I've read somewhere that they really did want to make it more sort of traditional, palatable fantasy.
Yeah.
Whereas in Oblivion, the game world was very alien and very sort of unusual, and that's a problem that I have with Elder Scrolls now too. Is like Oblivion and Skyrim are just sort of generic fantasy worlds. They're very well executed. That's not the problem, but they're very like.
But I think also that they
there's nothing interesting about the game world. Whereas with
I think
with,
also they created that generic fantasy world due to their popularity.
I mean, Dungeons and Dragons has existed for a very long time before.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
that's true.
if I'm remembering correctly, I even think I think Elder Scrolls actually started as like a D&D homebrew setting that they then made games out of.
Yeah,
But it was a lot more sort of.
but they're kind
It was a lot more experimental, and now it's not. And I understand why it's not experimental
But they're
anymore,
kind of-
because it's financially successful. And in order to be financially successful, you can't really take risks. 'Cause
Yeah.
not everybody's going to like those risks.
but they're kind
you
of
know?
the bearer of the standard
Yeah.
fantasy world,
Of course.
the Elder Scrolls period.
I'd rather play Skyrim than,
yeah,
what's name any other for honor.
But I think
is that one of them.
space sims can be pretty hard if we go back to that to do like believable or like immersive. But the really pretty old is from like early 2000s, I think. Freelancer. I played a
Haven't
lot.
heard of it.
It was pretty popular. It's the game that's a predecessor to what's that? Robert Space Industries game they've been developing forever, Star Citizen.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's like the predecessor to Star Citizen.
Cool.
But or an older like game there. And that game world is very cool and very believable and very immersive. And even though you can't walk around, you can never exit your ship. If you land on a planet, you have a pre-rendered character who you are. There is not too much dialogue.
No.
And the only connection you have with the planets is the landing sequence when the ship lands down. But all in all, it feels kind of immersive anyways, because you can go around and trade and sell, and there is the missions, of course. And I think it's just that you're traveling long times in space, and it's kind of boring. And that makes it...
Which is why Mass Effect is very successful in telling the same kind of story, because they give you all of these interpersonal... you have this cast of characters, and they call it a space opera, right? Because that's what it is. You have all of this downtime, technically speaking, where you can spend time with your crew on the ship.
Yeah.
And that's and that's really the meat of the game for me. Like, the missions and so on,
exactly.
that's all interesting, but the
downtime is so important, and it's that makes Freelancer also feel like very immersive, because in reality there is mostly downtime, and that just feels so real that you can just go there. And even though like you can sit on the bar in Freelancer, like with you have like one view, and you can select to go and take a mission. Or not. You can just sit there and enjoy the ambience.
Yeah.
Like in space, you can just trade.
Yeah.
Calmly, you know.
I'm thinking of this whole sort of space discussion got me thinking about Beyond Good and Evil 2.
All right. I haven't played that.
They're releasing a remaster of the first game. I cried when I saw the trailer, because the first Beyond Good and Evil means so much to me. When they properly announced the second game, which is, I think, in 2018 or
but it's a space game?
Yeah, well, I could talk your ear off about this. We might want to do that off the air. I'll tell you everything. But essentially, it is a space game, or they intended for it to be a space game.
Yeah.
The original game, which released in, I think, 2003. They were developing it since like the late 90s, and they had intended for it, because we have like early scripts for the game that leaked, and essentially it was meant to be a whole solar system where you could travel between planets, and the planets would have these civilizations, and there was a conspiracy, there's a whole thing. In the end, the game is just like, you have your home world, and then you go to space at the very end.
Yeah.
For a little bit, to go to a different area. Essentially, it's like in gameplay terms, it's very much just like a loading corridor. But for the second game, well, it was originally just going to be a straight-on sequel to the first game, and then they eventually re-announced it in like 2017, 2018, I think. And I'll show you some gameplay, because it seems like they wanted to really revisit that idea of like space travel. So they had these like planets that you could, like, fully simulated planets that you could travel between, and of course it's been in development hell since 2008, I think. Technically.
Well,
but the remaster is coming out on what day is it today? It is currently the 23rd. In 2 days.
Oh, wow.
The remaster of the first game's out.
So when this video is out on YouTube and the podcast is up on Spotify, it will be out.
And you will all need to have played it, or I will be very upset, because it's very, very good. And that's also another, because again, I played it when I was quite young, and that's another early. It's very like, have you ever played a Zelda game?
Not really.
It's very similar to sort of a Legend of Zelda thing. That was sort of the common comparison back in the day.
Right.
But it is very, very good and very, very immersive too, because you can tell that they spent so long designing not just the game itself, but the game world and the narrative and everything. It's extremely immersive.
Will be interesting to check out some clips later then.
Yeah, there's a trailer. Now, and again, I will not watch it, because I will burst into tears again.
Well,
because it was emotional. Let me tell you, I'm also that kind of person. Again, immersion. Speaking of immersion, because I'm very much like, I don't know how you feel about this, but when it comes to, and this is like for movies and books and stuff too, I am very easily like I will buy into whatever the game or the movie or the book or whatever it is. I'm
Yeah, I think I feel the same because I absolutely love the like Immortal Engines book
yeah.
when they are like where they're basically so-called attraction cities.
Okay.
That there is this like story that they had after the apocalypse, they had to take the cities of the like world, and they had to make them go around on like wheels.
Okay.
And they made like basically a religion out of it, that it was like unsophisticated to not have a city on wheels, and that
I've heard of this. I think
if
maybe
you
you've spoken to me about it.
And if your city, if your moving city has the ability to eat slash consume slash disassemble another city, you also have the right to do so. And that's like the system that everyone lives after. And of course, like mechanically wise, it's impossible to have cities on wheels. But I just love the idea so much. It's
you know, when
so
you buy
cool.
you buy into things.
Yeah, you like,
even if it's like, again, like for this,
it doesn't make sense, but I buy into the world.
Yeah.
And like
and I have a very easy time doing that. Like if I'm watching a movie.
Yeah, like me too.
And there's like a big beautiful like pan over like a vista of like nature, and there's like a swell of music.
Yeah.
I will nearly start crying because I'm in the moment. You know what I mean? Like I think that's part of immersion too. Is like you have to give yourself.
Yeah.
To whatever it is you're experiencing.
You have to not be too skeptical. You have to want to be immersed too, to easily be that.
Yeah.
But anyways, the author Philip Reeve, he invented like these obvious and cool things. In that world, they can't make plastic anymore.
Okay.
So, but
No
he
oil,
reused plastic. So there is this work that people have that's very appreciated, but also dirty work.
Yeah.
Which is plastic smith.
Oh, that's interesting.
Basically melting, molding, and working with plastic, like reusing. It's like a metal. Like we can't make it, but we can reuse it.
Yeah.
It's like it's just so immersive. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Like the world of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because that's again because I find that I have a very easy time immersing myself into things, but that's because
Yeah, like me too. I think Skyrim is immersive.
Yeah.
And I'm consciously avoiding the main quest.
Yeah.
And doing other things.
Yeah.
And that feels immersive to me.
Yeah.
But I understand some people might need a game like Mass Effect, which doesn't give you... Like, if you play Mass Effect, you can not be immersed.
True.
Because you're like...
But it's like there's a hand guiding you.
Yeah, there is a very strong iron fist guiding
Yeah.
you. It's like you can't walk around here and there. No, it's like literally, it's a arcade game.
Yeah.
You have a narrow corridor to walk into all the time.
Yeah.
And if you are forgetting that, well, then the immersion has made a good job because you have literally nowhere to go anytime.
No.
Mass Effect is very strict. You're walking in a
Very
corridor.
straightforward, yeah.
And the only thing is like the ends of the different games. You have like in the end like two different paths or something to choose from, and that's it.
Yeah.
And still, it's immersive.
Yeah.
It's pretty like story-wise, of course. Not like it's not an open world type of immersion like Minecraft or Wildline.
Player choice though for immersion is interesting because I find that that's a very common complaint where. Like, for example, the Mass Effect 3, the endings, you know, it's like you press 1 out of 3 buttons and that's the ending you get. And people are very sort of upset about that. Understandably so. I get where they're coming from. But at the same time, I feel like people are making it out to where, like, it's the choice that matters.
Yeah. It's
not really the choice, what you pick, that matters. It's the journey you've had up until that point.
Yeah.
And that was another, like, Life is Strange, for example, the first game anyway. People were very upset about the ending for that game as well, because it boiled down to a binary choice, which in the end was, like, not to spoil anything, but it was essentially, like, everything you did up until that point didn't really matter.
Yeah.
And people felt like that was very unfulfilling. But I'm like, no, but you had this whole, like, you had a whole journey before that.
I feel that...
And that's, like, that's the point.
Like the Mass Effect 3, you have had the entire gameplay experience.
2 prior games, even. So it's quite a lot.
2 prior games. So when you come to the like choice of getting one of the different endings, it should be an obvious choice for you.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, you haven't played your character.
Exactly. That's
If you
I've
played your
never
character-
thought of it in this way, but I
Yeah.
agree completely.
If you have played your character, like some people maybe play as yourself, but when I play, I usually set as like this character is so and so and behaves like this, and then you go through the world like this character, and then you come out to get like different endings or whatever it is. Like is you know, you have the blue and the red, you know, the red gate and the whatever.
Yeah.
Like due to your character's character, you already know which one to press, and you can do it fast because you know before you press that button if you're gonna be nice or not.
Exactly. And again, that's another thing where I think the first Mass Effect game was a little bit more binary in that sense, where it's like you have a good option and a bad option, or like a nice option and a bad guy option, right? The later games were not maybe so clear cut, which I appreciated. But again, like you're saying, if you're presented with a choice and you are role playing and you've given yourself to the experience in that way, the fact that it is a binary choice or it should not matter. You know what I mean? Because again, the point is the experience up until it doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah.
What matters is what you've done up until then, and that's the because of course, and again, maybe this is a weird thing to say, but I feel like if you're playing a video game, it's going to end sooner or later. You are not going to spend an infinite amount of time in that world unless it's Minecraft. You know what I mean? So it's like I feel like it is the experience is going to come to an end. Just give yourself to it.
I think it's a lot to do with the ending bias, that people put so much more like emphasis on how things ends to kind of understand the experience they had so far.
Maybe.
But there is a game which is I never played, which you played a good bit of, which is supposed to be pretty immersive, and that's Cyberpunk.
Yeah, I've played a little bit, not too much.
Not too much? I thought you played it.
I have like 50 hours.
50 hours?
50 hours. Most of that is like character creation and like the first act. I played up until like I've played the prologue.
Yeah.
Which was a sizable amount of time.
Yeah.
That's probably the majority of my playtime, but I haven't played it much at all.
To be
very honest with you.
Is it immersive?
I find it immersive because it is artistically... how do I put this? It is artistically coherent, and it's very curated and crafted. I wouldn't say, like, it is very obviously, like, gamey in the sense that, like, you have... The ways in which you can interact with the world are very... And they've improved this with later patches, of course. But, like, when I was mostly playing it, which was back when it released, it was very gamey mechanically, and the ways you could interact with the world were gamey accordingly also. But it was just presented in such a way that I stopped caring. Because you have the sound design, you have the music, you have the visuals, you have the story and the world building and everything, and that just came together in such a... The thing is, and this is again, like, this is how I feel about most video games, honestly. As long as there's a vision, I really don't care how good or bad a game is in any given way. If they are giving me... I have such strong feelings about this, so I don't really know even how to present my thoughts. But essentially, if they've curated and crafted an experience for you, and it's been done so well, and it's artistically impressive and coherent and blah 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 blah, it's hard for me not to be immersed. Yeah. Even if the gameplay experience is mediocre. You know
I think a lot of people, maybe you and I have the ability.
Not to say that Cyberpunk is mediocre, because it is a very good game.
Yeah, I think you and I have the ability to roleplay.
Yeah.
And I think if you do not, I think a lot of gamers may not have the ability to roleplay. And if you do not have the ability to roleplay, it will be so much harder to understand immersion and also get immersed.
Yeah.
But then, in those cases, I think a game like Mass Effect will be
It's a better
immersive.
choice.
Yeah,
of
because
course.
you have like 2, 3 different choices of what type of character you want to be. And if you're just playing as yourself, well, you don't need to think. You'll just need to do, and
Yeah.
you'll probably feel like you are in the game.
And I think that that's a
And
very
that's very easy.
common thing for people to do is to role play as themselves,
Yeah.
which I understand. Sometimes I do that too, but I like having a character.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know.
I think it's very
it's
personal.
like my one and only like tabletop role playing experience. It wasn't technically tabletop, or it wasn't like a pen and paper thing. There was like a board with pieces on it.
Yeah.
It was a Call of Cthulhu, I think. I remember this was many years ago. I remember playing it with a couple of acquaintances, and I was the only one who was not like power gaming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah.
I was intentionally picking the stupid choices because I feel
Yeah,
like that's what my character would do, and,
Yeah, exactly.
and everybody else was like so aware of the mechanics.
I
and
played
everything.
my like own fair share of tabletop gaming experience.
I was the first one to die, also. So I mean,
And like role playing games and stuff like that, like tabletop like role playing games. And man, it's so annoying when you have those people who are min maxing and just trying to get a hand of all of the rules. And I'm thinking like the entire point is to play, like, you know, as a specific character and maybe
but
not do the right
again,
things.
it depends on the game system also with tabletop stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have game systems that are more narrative, where the mechanics are less important, and you have other systems that are very mechanical.
Yeah, that's true.
Where the entire point is to roll the dice. Like
It's
for example,
a very, very big difference depending on the game master as well.
yeah, of course. But I mean, like for example, Vampire the Masquerade, you have mechanics, obviously, but they're not that detailed. And the entire point, they even say so in the books. It's like, you know, the point is to tell a story. The point is not really to play a game. And then that's sort of
Right.
what I've always sort of brought with me to everything else.
The books.
Yeah, because it's a pen and paper role playing game.
Oh yeah.
It's
Okay.
from like the 90s,
Yeah,
right? Of course, they've made video games and so on
yeah.
afterwards, obviously, and that's what most people, I guess, or like you or I would be familiar with. But
Yeah.
from
It is actually, yeah, I do remember that now.
but you know, and they do state very clearly like the mechanics are here to support the storytelling,
Yeah.
not the other way around.
And,
Whereas you have like, and again, you can play many with role playing games, especially you can sort of play them however you'd like. But like for example, I would imagine D&D is probably a lot more mechanics intensive if you want it to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But it's like, it's very interesting. I think it's a lot to do. And that's what something I do want to ask everyone who's listening to this. If you're on a platform where you can post a comment, like, do you role play as a character? Or do you prefer to just do what you would have done, like yourself? How do you play games? If you can comment on the platform you're listening to, that would be interesting to hear.
I think most people just play as themselves.
Maybe they do.
I think so.
Because
I know that's what I did before I got really into the idea of playing a character.
Yeah, I think maybe when I started to play like real role-playing games, like pen and paper, that's when I started to role play as characters in video games too. But it's really interesting.
But it's also because it gets so, if you're just playing as yourself,
Yeah.
in any given sort of, let's say a video game, for example, in any given video game story, there's a bad guy. There's going to be a difficult moral choice. Like if you've consumed enough media to where you're sort of familiar with how these sort of stories tend to play out, you already know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And that's boring. Whereas if I have a character who's sort of separate from myself, I sort of have to think and engage more with what I think.
Yeah, I think probably,
you know,
first time I played like Fallout 3 or something,
Yeah.
I was like so nice and wanted to do the right thing and, you know, playing as myself.
Yeah.
And then I just played it again. And I just, you know, but
Did the opposite of
what
the first
if
time.
I'm a nasty ass all the time?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
See if I can survive.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of successful characters in this game world who are pretty nasty.
Yeah, of course.
So that would be, and that was like a fun experience to like be someone else than yourself. And it's like, I feel that if a game like From the Depth, it's like no story, just building. I think it's immersive for me because I'm like imagining up this very complex army structure
Yeah.
with like classes, with like ships, with like roles.
It's like theater.
Yeah.
You're filling in the blanks for yourself, you know?
And I'm just crafting a world because it's basically like a blank canvas, just like Minecraft. I can do whatever I want, and it's immersive for me because I can role play in this world. And that's like, okay, I'm gonna make a realistic navy. We need these classes. We need this.
Yeah.
This is a role that does this. This should have this and this, and put together, and that's pretty immersive. And I think we've talked a lot about game world immersion, and we talked a lot about game play immersion. But I feel we may have avoided, and story immersion, of course. But I think we might have avoided sensory immersion.
But that's because that's still so new. VR, for example.
It's not new. It's not
Okay,
new. And
go ahead.
that's the thing I'm gonna talk about. Because they actually did some studies, as I talked about screen size and sensory immersion. So sensory immersion is not something we should just like sweep under the rug and forget about, because it is important. I think it's more immersive to play on a computer than on a television, because you're sitting so far from the television. And I think something with a mouse and keyboard feels immersive. And
It's more tactile, maybe.
Yeah, it's like tactile. You like need to do big moves.
Because usually if you're playing a video game on a computer with a mouse and keyboard, the inputs are probably a bit more complicated, generally speaking.
They are, and they're also faster. And with the controller, I don't know. I think you miss some of that immersion.
Maybe.
I think so. And I found a study a couple of years ago about effects of screen size, viewing angle, and players' immersion, tendencies on game experience.
Okay.
So it's a study I found on Science Direct, made by Jinghui Huo, Yu Jung Nam, and et al. A group of scientists.
Yes.
And I'm just gonna read the abstract because I think this is really, and you're gonna think this is very interesting too.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I think so.
We'll see.
I know it actually for a fact.
Okay.
This study so I'm gonna read the abstract then. This study investigated the effects on viewing angle manipulated through screen size and the moderating role of players' immersion, tendencies on presence experience in the context of computer game playing. 30 participants played a third-person computer game, Tomb Raider 2, in two screen size conditions, 12-inch and 81-inch displays. They analyzed, showed that playing in front of a large screen led to a more favorable impression on the game character, a more positive mood change, and significantly higher feelings of both physical and self-presence, confirming previous research. Our findings also reveal that individuals' intrinsic immersion's tendencies have a positive moderating effect on the sensations of physical and self-presence. Above and beyond the influence of screen size, the results suggest that feeling a presence. The results suggest that a feeling of presence, as well as overall game experience, is determined by interaction between technological factors and human influence. So that tells the story basically.
Tomb Raider 2. When is this study from? Because if they're talking about the like Tomb Raider 2, like the one from the 90s, that's a very old game to sort of base a study like this on. A game that I think suits the purpose of what they were trying to find out. But that's
2010, I think.
Okay.
It's not super old. 2008, not certain, it doesn't say on top, so I just referenced some other numbers during the article.
That's cool.
But again, basically,
that's interesting.
If you have a large screen, you will feel more present in the game, and you will feel more emotionally connected
Yeah.
to the character. So your gameplay immersion will be higher. You will care more about the game.
Yeah.
You will feel more like one with the character.
Yeah.
And basically, screen size matters.
Screen size does matter, huh?
It does. It does.
No, 1440p is sort of where I top out for myself. I'm like, I don't feel like I need a larger screen than that.
But that's resolution. Not
Yeah,
screen
but I mean,
size.
I guess so. But I mean, if you have a specific, I don't know how these things interact, to be honest with you. But
No,
but I feel like if you have a certain resolution, you can only go up to a certain physical screen size.
No, not
before it-
really.
Maybe.
I had a 1080p television that was 32-inch as a display before.
Right.
And it's like pretty large, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And now I have the same size, but 1440p. That's nice.
Yeah.
I don't need 4K for that size, but you know, that's about this size is about as large you can have on a desk without it being weird.
Yeah.
And I do really feel the immersion when like playing. It's like you're even, you know, when you're really immersed in the game,
Yeah.
you kind of want to get closer.
Yeah,
to
I know.
the
You
display.
lean in.
And the
again,
larger display you have, the less close you have to get.
Yeah. And I'll also say this, speaking of Tomb Raider, right?
Yeah.
Ask anybody who's played, especially the older games, about whenever there's a swimming section and the fact that you tend to hold your breath along with the character.
Yeah.
That's a classic.
You
And
know-
I also think the using the older Tomb Raider games as an example in this study,
Yeah.
that's very because those games are very mechanically intensive in terms of like because you got the tank controls and it's on a grid system and you're sort of really responsible for like if you make a jump you have to physically push a button to make her grab the ledge as well and it's
Yeah.
very sort of granular in that sense. So
And
that's
I do
also
think I don't think it's only screen size that matters. I think that perhaps resolution is less important. I think it's the size that is important.
Yeah.
But I do think the frame rate is
course.
important.
Yeah.
If the frame rate is below 60, I think it's going to have a big negative impact on immersion.
I have to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I used to be one of those people where I was like, who cares what the frames per second are? But
Yeah.
that's also because when I was playing Skyrim back in the day, I played it at a solid like 20 frames at most. You know what I mean?
Cinematic mood.
Yeah, exactly. But now, especially now that I have sort of the rig that I have, it's,
Yeah, you have like 240 hertz or something.
yeah, I do.
240, that's
240, yeah.
very big.
Yeah, and I've turned into one of those people.
I mean, it matters.
You
If
know,
you're
where it's
playing
like,
fat
oh,
games-
it's under 60, I can't play it. And I'm like, I've turned into one of those people, and I hate that about myself, but it's, you know...
It's that but true, but yeah, it matters.
It does, yeah.
You will like see the jumps when you move you around, and it's like no, it breaks the immersion.
Yeah.
It breaks it. But it's really interesting with like sensory immersion because when I play like I have a joystick, so that actually makes me worse at many of the games I use it with. It makes me worse, but I choose to use it anyways because it adds immersion. I love playing like MechWarrior games with like a joystick.
Oh, sure.
Because it's so cool, and you have the airplanes and you have the helicopters.
It's like when you have a racing game, you have the wheel, right?
Yeah. And you know, it doesn't necessarily. It can even make my performance worse, but it feels immersive. I'm like sitting there looking in the screen, and I'm like doing moving around with my head and trying to like follow and like compensate for the G-forces.
Yeah, I know.
And it's very immersive. So
That's I've started playing most games with a gamepad, a 360 or a Xbox One controller is what I have.
why? How could you?
Because I feel like I have too much control with a mouse and keyboard.
What do you mean too much control?
I feel like I don't know. I don't know how to explain this. But you know, like your whole thing with the joystick, I have this very similar thing about gamepads. Where for some reason not being able to make those sort of split second snappy movements or decisions
So you're having like a game controller as a kind of handicap
A little bit.
to kind of feel a little bit like a human.
Yes.
So you're like Lara Croft and you have a reaction time.
Yes. Especially, it's funny because I started playing, because of course, when I was originally playing the Tomb Raider games, I played them on the PlayStation, so I only had the gamepad, that's all I had, right? Yeah, there we go. But then I started playing them on PC almost exclusively, and I learned to play them with a mouse and keyboard. Well, keyboard only, actually, is how they're played. But then when the remasters came out, I started playing them with a gamepad. And I had this, like, maybe it's a nostalgia thing, but I had this rush of, like, I felt so much more connected to the character and what was going on in the game. Just because I didn't have that sort of... Because I could play on a mouse and keyboard, I could play them without looking, essentially.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas with the gamepad, I do have to sort of feel out, like, okay, I have to push this button. I've sort of handicapped myself a little bit, and that does help me.
But it's also really
myself.
important because I think the way you start playing a game might be important too. That it feels like more immersive.
Yeah.
Because I start to play games with mouse inverted. That's how I learned to play video games.
An inverted mouse?
Yeah. Inverted y-axis.
What's wrong? Well, let's not get into that, but what's wrong with you?
That's like the original way to play also.
I
The
know.
first games, the y-axis was inverted. So the person who like introduced me to video games, he was kind of an old school player, so he just had it inverted. And that's how I started to play video games with the y-axis inverted.
That's horrible.
And no, so then I just played it like that, and it was very immersive. And then
I guess again that's very well, that makes sense though, because I feel like
And then I'm going to get back to that that you're about to say, but then I started to, like, when I was 12, I went to like internet cafes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And nobody plays with the mouse inverted, so then you have to change the setting all the time, and it's kind of a hassle. So I relearned myself to play the game with quotation mark normal y-axis mode, which is not the old normal, but the new normal.
New normal, yeah.
And then I did that, and I always had the sense that I learned to play it well, of course. And I did that for many years, so that's how I played most of the games, actually. But I always had a sense that something was missing.
Right. Okay.
That some type of immersion was missing. So then a couple of years ago, I tried to play inverted again. And I got back to it pretty fast, actually.
Yeah.
It didn't take
Muscle
too
memory.
long. And it felt more immersive.
Yeah.
I can't deny that it feels more immersive. And now I play my games with mouse inverted. And it's very interesting how that works. Because I did find some... Now, I don't have the studies
I've read this study too, I think.
Yeah, you
That's
did.
the thing.
And it kind of depends. If your sense of self is just...
Exactly.
It's just on your eyes / just behind your eyes. Or if your sense of self is a little bit further back inside your head, like behind the eyes.
Yeah.
If your sense of self is where you have your eyes, it's probably more natural to not have the y-axis inverted. But that will feel more immersive to you because you're kind of moving an object. And if you have yourself or the sense of self a little bit more back in your head, then it feels more immersive to have the mouse inverted. Because when you're moving the mouse, you're kind of feeling that you're not moving the crosshairs across the screen. You are feeling that you're moving the gun across the screen.
Yeah.
So that's kind of more closely simulated how a gun would be moving, because if you're back in your head and you're pointing your gun like upwards, you're not moving.
Yeah.
You are with your, like, if you're right-handed, you're with your right hand with the gun stock, and that's actually moving down a bit.
Exactly.
But if you're at your crosshairs, well, then you're feeling you're at the tip of the gun, and that feels more immersive if you drag it across there.
I'm trying to think of... I don't know about... Well...
And that's my input on sensory immersion. Very, like, interesting, dependent on yourself, on your sense of self.
Yeah.
And you can always learn to play the other way. But if you want to feel immersive, you have to think about, do my sense of self be like basically on my eyes or far back in the skull?
Yeah.
That will determine what probably is the best
No, it
choice.
depends. It depends on the game too, for me, or even what I'm doing in the game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If it's just like a camera control, I do like. Wait, what's X and what's Y?
Y is
Why is this one?
like moving up and down, of course. Yeah.
I do like having the and the Y-axis inverted, I think, for like camera control
Yeah.
a lot of time, but it depends on the kind of game that I'm playing too.
Yeah, it of course depends.
If it's a first-person thing, I do want it to be non-inverted, but if it's a third-person thing, I do want to be able to push the thumbstick down to look up.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
So it depends a little bit on the game too for me.
I think it does for many people actually, and it's really interesting when I have the mouse inverted like that.
Yeah.
The joystick makes more sense suddenly because it
Yeah,
mirrors
but
the movement.
it's physical in a different way. It's three-dimensional in a way that mouse movements are not. You know.
But
So
it
that
would
makes
it
sense.
it would mirror the movements. Like when I push my joystick back, I of course move up.
Up, yeah.
It's like when I drag the mouse back, I look up.
Yeah, yeah.
So it mimics that too. It's a very I think it's very personal what you prefer, dependent on different stuff. And I so want about sensory immersion. I don't want to play airplane games until I get a VR headset because I feel like I want to be immersed in like aircraft games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it feels like I need to have like the VR headset to really.
I mean, if you're gonna
Yeah.
do it, you might as well do it properly, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I feel. That would be very like immersive. So I tried some different VR headsets, and that's of course a very important point for like future of immersion,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah. I think we're gonna see more AR though.
Yeah,
Before we
probably.
see more VR. And the thing about that too is, I think AR is gonna start to have more of a presence outside of gaming
Yeah, of
before
course.
it starts.
You know the
implemented into games,
Apple what are
the Google
the Apple-
Google Glass.
the Apple headset, the new one.
I don't know.
They just half a year ago or whatever.
I don't know.
They released their Apple headset
Yeah.
for VR, which is very like people think it's pretty good actually, but it looks a bit stupid, of course, and dystopic. But the thing with it,
But it's one of those things where it like wraps around, right? It looks silly because it's a big contraption.
no, it's like a regular,
Oh, it is. Okay.
yeah. And it was supposed to show your eyes through the glass, but
Oh,
it
yeah.
doesn't. But it projects a weird image of your eyes. It looks stupid. But that is very popular for AR. Like it simulates the room you're in. It basically shows you the room you're in, and you can place it. You don't see through it,
No.
but the cameras makes it look like you see through it, and you can like place the windows here and there with like the different programs you're working in from your Mac.
Right.
You can connect it to your Mac, and you have an AR experience there.
Yeah.
But
I think that's going to become more common before we start seeing it implemented in games to that extent.
I think they have to find a good solution on how to move about.
And I think also because you have like Pokemon Go, which is a very
Yeah.
I feel like that's where we've seen AR in games for the most part is the sort of casual.
Yeah,
Well,
it's a bit
Pokemon Go is
professional.
casual, but then you got like geocaching, and that's an AR thing too, right? But that's
It
different.
is.
But that's a little bit.
But
more,
I
that's,
think
a bit, that's a
VR
bit more subcultural, I guess.
I think VR has a big future in every game where the character is sitting down. If you're sitting in a spaceship, if you're sitting in a car,
Yeah.
if you're sitting on a bike, you don't need to solve the issue where you need to move about with your legs.
Right.
If you're sitting down and you have your control there,
Yeah.
VR is of course the answer
Yeah.
to get maximum immersion.
Yeah.
So I like to get a VR headset sometime to kind of experience that immersion. And I really like MechWarrior games, so it would be so cool to play mech games. with a VR headset.
I remember when I was very young, I had for my PlayStation 2 that I had for a short while, I had Dead or Alive 2 on it. and my dad, I suppose, got me this. It was like a DDR, like a DDR. What would you even call that? It's not a controller at that point, but it was like a map, and then you have the arrows, like the D-pad, essentially on the floor.
It's like a dancing mat?
Yeah, if it was like a dancing mat, but then you also had like two little plastic things like on the sides in front of you, and then there were like sensors running between the
wow.
It was I don't know how to explain it, but it was a dancing mat, and then you had these two little plastic things at the front, and then you had like sensors running parallel to where, like, if you moved your hand through the sensor,
wow,
that corresponded to a button input.
Okay, that's a big setup. That's cool.
Yeah, it was plasticky. It was not. I mean, I'm sure it's like technically like not very impressive these days,
No,
but I
of
remember
course
at the time being like physically being able to act out a fight, you know, in a fighting game, and I thought that was very fun. Of course, it was like physically strenuous, so I didn't play with that too much, but but I remember just being able to, like, okay, if I want to do a kick, I'll kick out, and then I'll hit the sensor that I mapped to like. The kick button, right?
But that's pretty. That was like the pretty cool thing with Wii.
Yeah.
Where Nintendo Wii.
Yes.
When that came out, it was pretty cool that you could like point and click.
Yeah. I remember the 6-axis for the PlayStation as well. The motion controls, like, that was also quite fun. I did have a Wii. I thought it was quite...
It was cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
I had a really... When we're talking about, like, immersion memories, I have this really cool immersion memory where I did play when I was very young. I did play some... what is it? Like, airplane simulators. Like, I think it was Flight Combat Simulator 3 or something like that.
Okay.
And... that was so cool because the guy I tried it at, he had this, things you put on your head, and you had like infrared sensors. It's basically tracking where you were looking.
Oh, it's one of those, like an eye tracker.
Basically the predecessor to eye tracker. So like head tracking equipment. So it kind of could sense where you were looking. And that would make you, of course, look even more inside of the game. So you looked a little bit to the left, and the character, like in the airplane, looks like 90 degrees to the side. So you could like tilt your head to different sides to look around. And that was so cool, so immersive.
Yeah.
So that was really... I want to re-experience that, but with... Because I actually looked at those eye tracking devices.
Tobii, right? That's the
big one. My gaming laptop has a built-in Tobii eye tracker, but it's pretty shit actually.
Oh, okay.
And it works with so few games.
I know.
It's embarrassing.
Rise of the Tomb Raider has support for it. I'll tell you that.
Oh well, maybe I'll install the Tobii eye tracking software again then.
Yeah.
If I
think Portal also has support for the eye tracker, right?
Yeah, probably. But I looked at the different systems.
Or no, that was the Sixth Sense. Sorry.
I just feel that, man, this is so behind VR. Well, at that point, one should probably just get a VR headset.
Yeah.
But it's cool.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Of course.
But I don't know. Do we have anything more to talk about immersion? We talked a lot about immersion.
We've talked for a while. I was gonna say, what's time? You know, we good? What's going on there?
We are only 1 hour and 20 minutes, so it's it's short enough for being one episode. But it's I don't have much on my head right now. I think we talked about most of the different immersions with the sensory,
most of the bases,
gameplay. Immersion, mechanic immersion. And again, I will say this. Immersion is too broad of a topic. It's too many, it encompasses too many things.
Yeah. That's been the theme so far, I feel like, for everything we've talked about. It's like, this is a broad topic.
This is too broad.
Let's see what we can do with it.
It's like immersion is basically, is this a good gameplay experience? To some extent.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the oversimplifying things.
Well...
But anyways, you have been listening to Gaming and Tech for a Better World on GMODISM with Eric.
And Carrie.
And you should definitely support this podcast on shop.gmodism.com if you like to do that. You have the option. Otherwise, stay tuned on whatever platform you're on, and
we will see you next time. Hopefully not in a month.
Definitely. Hopefully a little bit in a week or something.
I mean, my work's been slowing down for me. So honestly, like in this instance, I have to be honest with you guys, I'm the problem. Because I'm the one who doesn't have time for anything.
Problem child.
I know. I'm getting I'm getting the shit beat out of me at work, essentially. But we're entering the low season, thank God. So we should be fairly smooth sailing from here on out.
Very nice.
I think so.
Well, anyways, and if you want to see if you want to see us, you need to watch via YouTube.
Look in a mirror. You know?
Yeah. And if you want to see us, look at YouTube. Otherwise, you can keep listening. Anyways, we're signing out.
We are signing out.